A few words.
Thank you. Briefly, I want to talk about two things which theoretically may look incompatible: today's production cost and long-term competition in the energy industry worldwide. As for costs, when I joined the oil industry in 1967, already Maurice Edelman's paper, Cost in 4 Areas, was in circulation. It was published later, I think, 69, 70. He found out that the cost of production in Iraq was somewhere in the region of 4 cents per barrel. This was the result of the Gusher Kirkuk 1, which was 100,000 barrels daily of production. And when you divide that by the cost which was put into the production of that amount of oil, you will find that it was very low. By today's prices, probably it could be somewhere in the region of 40 cents, given technical specifications of Kirkuk oil wells at the time. Today's cost of production in Iraq was unfortunately influenced very heavily by what was published by the Ministry of Oil in 2009, 2010, 2011, which really simply divided the cost, capital, and operating by the amount of oil produced during that year. The years which were reported and then developed forward from 1911, 12 to 1917, and the numbers in some cases were in the region of $18 per barrel. And the averaging out of some of those numbers from the Ministry of Oil were rounding between $10 and $11 per barrel. That is nowhere near what the economic cost, capital, and operating cost of the long-term life of the oil produced from the per barrel incremental oil produced by operating capital cost. We have to divide and use the total producible. Even if we use discounted cash flow, discounting the future, we still have to divide by the total life of the oil field. And actually talking about cost in a country is meaningless. We have to work by well and at least by field. Field to field, we have marginal cost increasing as we go into more difficult fields and lower producing fields. As for the implication of that for today's policy, we have to look into long-term supply cost and long-term potential competition in the oil industry, energy industry. We heard a rosy picture from Mr. Barkindo. From Mr. Sin, probably we heard a moderate view of the future. I will give you the worst case scenario of declining demand on oil beyond 2040, 45, 50. Whether it's going to be my view or anybody else's view, it's going to be high competition between various producers, and we are increasingly finding new sources of oil from different sources. And today's problems faced by OPEC were created basically by shale oil and American production rising beyond anything that OPEC has seen in the past. This problem which OPEC is facing today, competition in the markets, they have to reduce production, and probably this competition will continue to some extent in the future. As for Iraq, Iraq, in my view, probably has the highest reserve of producible oil at reasonable cost from the whole international community. Forget about Venezuela with heavy oil, it's going to be high cost. Forget about tar sands in Canada, they are going to be high cost. But if we look into the cost of production today in Iraq and the potential for long-term capability of producible oil at reasonable costs, we have to look into the implications of competition from now into the future and its meaning and implications for today's policies in Iraq. Iraq has somewhere in the region of 520 anomalies which may, according to historical practice, according to historical evidence, it's about 70% until now of each of these anomalies we will be finding oil. Most of the anomalies which not have been developed are in the northwest of Iraq, and we have somewhere in excess of 400 anomalies which have not been explored properly with some exploration drilling to see whether there is oil and whether there is how much quantity of oil there is. Probably we'll have more gas and light oil in these regions in the Western Desert. What does that mean for the policy today? It means that Iraq, regardless of today's competition and compliance with OPEC, lowering production, Iraq is going to have very low-cost oil, probably the lowest-cost oil in the world, at its hands in the future. Recently, two papers were published by a very important researcher, Dr. Ali Mirza, on the cost of Iraqi oil today. And they were published in the network of Iraqi economists. He used some simple modeling to come up with reasonable costs, whether present cost or discounted cash flow costs in the future, with a simple model with numbers coming to the region of $4 in various models. The proper cost with the total future potential production from most of Iraqi oil fields today, it's probably in the region of $4 per barrel. And that is not on the average of the Middle East, it's the lowest of major oil producers. And since it is the lowest oil producer, with that potential, which could be as much as Saudi Arabia, or in some estimates more than Saudi Arabia, Iraq has to plan now on how to face competition in the future, with the lessons telling us that actually the Ministry of Oil today should continue investing in technology, in potential increase in oil production, and in exploration of areas which have not been explored. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adnan. That was very interesting. Now, going on to the questions, I'd like to start with Mr. Al-Yasiri. Dr. Adnan clearly told us here to forget about high-priced oil. So in this drive for low-cost barrels, how does Iraq compare to other countries? And can you just tell us a little bit about your forward-looking strategy as BP in Iraq?